Hello, everybody. Hello, friends. Thanks for coming out on such a cold evening. And thanks to James Fraser for hosting this event in the Grolier. I'm going to introduce the readers this evening one at a time, so I'll be jumping up and down. And our first reader is Julia Lisella. In addition to her latest collection, Our Lively Kingdom, Julia Lisella is the author of 2 previous volumes, Always and Terrain. Her poems are widely anthologized and appear regularly in magazines, including Ploughshares, Pangyrus, Alaska Quarterly Review, Ocean State Review, Prairie Schooner, and others. A professor of English at Regis College, she co-curates the Italian-American Writers Literary Series at IAWA Books, Boston. Her poems tease out and illumine the holy, the miraculous hidden in the quotidian, tracing the outline of mystery, but always resisting the escape into abstraction and restoring us to the people, places, and predicaments of our world with a renewed humility and a greater appreciation for the ineffable. At the same time, and driven by the same deeply spiritual perspective, she gives voice to her conscience, addressing history and community and poems that strengthen us for a precarious future. Please welcome Julia Lisella.
Oh. Oh.
No, wait. There we go.
Oh, okay. Is this good? I don't. Oh, I'm putting my timer on. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Richard. I hope I live up to your introduction. That was really beautiful. And thank you, everybody, for coming out. And again, James, thank you. And it's great to be reading with JD and Lynne. And also want to thank Carol Mankiti for keeping this this place going. And it's so special to be here. We all talk about it when we stand up here. And hi, everyone on Zoom. I promised I would wave. And so these earlier books have been sitting on the shelves at the Grolier for as long as when I dropped them off, when I wrote them, when they were published. And so I thought it would be nice to have the voice of those poems in the room. So I don't usually do this, but I'm going to read one poem from each of the older books first. And the first book is from, the first poem's from Terrain. And I write a lot about, or I should say that motherhood has fed a lot of my poems, maybe is a better way to think about it. Old body. Sleeping Beauty's kingdom slept for longer than we've been crying. And didn't that story begin with the pain of parents and an only child? I am 2 dead babies so far. One more and it will be almost my mother's story too. The same dumb well that can't wail and carry on for its own sake. Though in comparison, my life is charmed. No 17-year-old American girl translating bank warnings and eviction notices into Italian for her parents. Still, my babies follow me everywhere, enter our dirty, mixed-up family with tender feet, joining so many other ghost babies at the table. And we've set places for none of them. I am sister, mother, daughter to them all. Grief in the half shadows, though I want to get on with it. No shelter, the wild little unborn scoff. Either way, you'll join us, they seem to say. When I turn my head in the car, I see one child, one car seat. The child is smiling, dreaming of her but instead of lightness, I feel only its strange borders and no ending that can arrange this thing for the moment when we awake. So that book was a lot about, can I move this a little bit? I feel like I'm stuck up. That book was a lot about, the process of trying to make a family. And the one poem in here is on my little cheat sheet, Mothering at Midlife. So things happened between the two books, didn't they? Mothering at Midlife. When you called me mommy, the world was a blue thing. Summer sky blue, that rich blue, no one could break through. But blue too, as the blue of blown glass, fragile but firm, iridescent. Now you are half girl, half woman. I'm mom or ma, ordinary faded porcelain blue, like the ceramic melt of colonial dinnerware we dig for in the rubble of our New England backyard, broken off and diminished. Or I'm blue ringed, blue edged like spotlight or headlight, and the world isn't waiting for me to pronounce what it is like. So I'm gonna, I think I left my water. I did, sorry. That must have looked great on Zoom. Sorry. So I'm reading now from my latest book, Our Lively Kingdom. It was published by Bordighera Press, to whom I'm very grateful. Wonderful editor there. Nick, who stuck by me through the book and helped me out with this, and really appreciated it. So the first poem I'm going to read, let's see, I'm following my sheet, is Hunger. Yeah, please. I can't read the page numbers. Okay. Thoughts about hunger on a morning walk. All life is like that, a pursuit to satiate hunger, hunger for love, hunger for food, hunger for, and in pursuing it, not beauty, but violence, which eats that hunger, persistent as the ants in the cleave of sink, the wasps boring out of the hole in the ground, the dog whining for the company of some mammal nearby, the squirrel carrying half a bagel across the lawn and in a flash, dropping it in pursuit of another catch, more life in which to pursue hunger. The lady in night shorts watering the lamppost and the curved brick edging, while the grass beneath her slippers yearns. This is the way we trick ourselves, decorating the hunger with potted plants and plastic figurines. My text to my son 200 miles away, have a good day, I love you, which is not a real greeting, but the hunger to lift him again in my arms as he once was. Even my mother at 97, still feeding me her hunger, her worry, her thirst, her arms nearly breakable in sleep, joints no longer connecting elbow, knees, and toes. Parrying, contemplating, these are just fillers like so much refuse on the shoreline of a city beach. Evidence that we lived, broke open a beer, relished a drumstick or an apple, cores and bones washing up, reminding us of hunger. Now at the kitchen sink, the minuscule ants march ferociously into the sprayed raid, as if each still in life, still in pursuit, still hungry. I just realized oh no, my phone's off. Okay. Sorry about that. And a lot of the book was written, can you hear me? A lot of the book was written during COVID, or was compiled certainly during COVID. So I think that colored a lot of what I was writing about COVID, and what finally seemed like an emergency with our institutions and the racism. People were becoming much more aware of everything, which was good. So I think a lot of the end of the book was sort of colored by some of this prayer. I have written to you before, and though I've tried to wait, I am impatient in my prayers, and I do not know where my praise ends up. I know I must include it with the ask, send it forth to the great goddess. Maybe if I lighted candles as I did through Europe as a college student, saying my mother's name, my aunt's name in various country churches and city cathedrals. I never prayed for my father or my boyfriend. It was not as though they were not worth the coin I pressed into the copper boxes and listened for, the clang I heard, coin to bottom of the box or duller coin to coin, but that they did not hear the call those prayers made as well as the women who had tended me would. When I said my mother's name, her life would rise to me and to you, sweet goddess, in our steadfast breath. And she would know I was fine without the help of cell phone or email. I must believe in the prayers again, offered with make-believe coins and make-believe boxes. Maybe this poem is the box into which I press the coin. Those beads of words themselves the prayer. The sounds are love and must transpire, but the prayer is so much bigger, a terrible request of Mary and Elizabeth, who also must be Jesus' Father and Holy Ghost. It is a prayer of only pleading, and not only for the dear women who loved me, but it must attend to the mess of the world. Hear the terrible unformed cries, little yelps in the universe, and speed something like, not recovery, because who would want to return to what churned this, but to something like health of bones, of muscle, of lungs, of love for the other, whom I'm yet to meet. So I thought there might be a lot of teachers here. So I'm reading my classroom poem. Maybe there aren't, I don't know, but I'm a teacher. This poem sounds like I wrote it right before they sent us home for COVID, but I didn't. It was just an ordinary day when I was leaving the classroom, but it takes on this extra weight now. I don't know. Classroom poem. My back to the small lecture hall, and it's now quiet swivel chairs, only the hum of the fluorescents dimming. I followed my hand with my eyes as I wiped the shiny white surface clean of the red dry erase marker, making new shapes as my hand passed through letters I'd drawn and arrows, underlines doubled, thinking as my hand moved what they might have thought, having read little of the novel, perhaps only knowing the parts I'd sung out to them with so much joy. And now my joy was just mine. And for some reason, all I could think was happy, happy, happy to be in that room, loving, having taught more than teaching, knowing the air it had left in the room better than any other knowledge. How to explain the silvery strain their boredom or wonder had left in my lungs, in the stretch of my torso as I reached to wipe the uppermost notes clear, as if also wiping clear the me who had longed once to be in that place in which I now stood. And just check my time. I'm bad at this. I'm very bad at this. Sorry. But you said you're checking the time. I know you're lying. Okay. Okay. There are a few presences in the book, presences of other poets. One of them is Sylvia Plath. So this is a poem about sort of looking back at my early days as a mom. My son should not be too worried about this, but it was a real thing. Labor after 2 decades. And it begins with an epigraph from Frida Hughes, Sylvia Plath's daughter, which says, "They are killing her again." Frida Hughes from The Mother. In the early years, my legs, like the hindquarters of an animal, would collapse beneath me. Most days you would have to say I wasn't coping well. The cupboard doors open, I'd sway into its hollow as though to put my whole body in there. The toddler, doe eyes watching me, raspberry lips, tiny glistening teeth. A small girl bracing. Does she remember how I couldn't lift my fork some days, couldn't move, couldn't do? Is it too much for you some days? I'd ask any other mother, and then no, like a whip against my skin, and how I knew it was coming, though I'd ask again and again. Around 5 p.m. each night, my breath would go faster, rounder, and I could no longer look at the clock, afraid then and there I'd burst, loosening the love I'd learned as a child into sharp slivers, barely visible on the faux brick linoleum floor. That year, I bought a copy of the Diaries of Sylvia Plath, flipped to the middle of the book, and realized I could not do it, had no right, had no vision large enough to hold the both of us. This was the first book I've ever thrown away. The other presence in the poem a little bit is Emily Dickinson, and this is a poem about my mother and Emily. They're very close. Has a long epigraph from Jan Bervin from her Studies in Scale, and this is Jan Bervin writing. Emily Dickinson sent this minuscule 2-inch long pencil in a letter to the Bowles. If it had no pencil, would it try mine? Wryly nudging them to write. It was enveloped in a letter folded into thirds horizontally, pinned closed at each side. So it's Jan Bervin. Like the poet, my mother wrote letters all her life, puzzling messages, half in pencil, half in ink. She taped them laboriously instead of pinned them, each one almost the same. Instead of a pencil hinting for us to write, a $5 bill sometimes crimped into a small square, and when most mischievous, a single dollar folded many times and have a cup of coffee, see you soon, God willing, scratched inside a greeting card from a mission she'd given money to, or on a quarter of a blue-lined sheet of loose leaf, and wrapped and etched on that another note, kisses and hugs marked in X's and O's. Each edge of card or sheet snugly taped, the envelope itself double sealed, especially the minuscule space between where the envelope glue ends and no sealant lives. Now the notes addressed to my kids, and like Emily's command to the Bowles to write back, take your mother out for coffee, buy something, God bless. That's my time, thank you.
Our next reader is the one and only J.D. Scrimgeour. In addition to his latest full-length collection, Lifting the Turtle, J.D. Scrimgeour is the author of The Last Miles and Territories, and he won the AWP Award for Nonfiction for his essay collection, Themes for English B, A Professor's Education in and Out of Class. Recently, he published the Chapbook Festival, filled with poems of homage to friends who are fellow poets. Few poets are as adventurous as J.D. With musician Philip Swanson, he recorded Ogunquit and Other Works, a CD blending music and poetry. Recently, I had the great pleasure of collaborating with him, along with Yueshi Wu, on a video essay regarding a painting by Salvador Dali. And after a few years studying Chinese, he produced the exquisite short poems of his book, Banana Bread, writing first in Chinese and then translating his own poems into English. Zhang Zhiqing, poet, translator, scholar, and author of A History of 20th Century American Poetry, has written of Banana Bread. It's amazing. for an American to write such wonderful poems in idiomatic Chinese. I particularly appreciate the wordplay and humor in these beautiful poems. To wit, the opening of the short poem, April 3rd. Do you see me? I am wearing rain. I am wearing your hope. It looks good on me. It shines. Scrimgeour's poems engage fearlessly with mortality, not only with death and grief, but with time passing swiftly and elusively, and sometimes turning back on itself as memory. His poem Monarch opens with maybe the most assertive metaphor I've ever read. I know it was time itself, that butterfly I saw, dead.
Yeah.
Other times, mortality requires a bit of tongue in cheek and a sidelong glance to describe it. One of my favorites, Cemetery Poem, begins, sooner or later, every poet writes a cemetery poem, and then proceeds to write what must be the mother of all cemetery poems. This is our life he's writing about. I'm quoting my blurb on Lifting the Turtle. And in these exquisite poems, it is by turns recognizable and strange. Please welcome J.D. Scrimgeour.
Hey, everyone. An honor to be here tonight. Thanks for coming out. Such a cold night. Richard read you all the best lines of my poems, so I should just stop. I'm going to work backwards. I'll read from Shengjiao Mianbao, or Banana Bread, which is a bilingual collection. And about 6 years ago, when I traveled to Nanjing, China, I started teaching some students who were exchange students, eventually came over to Salem State where I teach. And I decided to learn a little bit of Mandarin as part of that. And I was successful because very little. And but I became pretty close to this group of students, and we started trying to translate together contemporary Chinese poetry. And then the pandemic happened, and partly to just keep in touch with them, in the Google Doc that we shared, I started writing kind of daily journal entries in Chinese, also to practice my Chinese, which is really bad. And those entries turned into poems, and I translated them back into English. So I'll start with some of those. So just remember, this is at the beginning of the pandemic. I should say finally that I really don't know how these poems feel to readers of Mandarin. I suspect they sound like a deranged kindergartner, which they might sound like in English too. So. All right. March 13. Oh, I'm only reading the English too. Today, everyone looks nervous. Everyone is nervous. No one laughed. No one kissed. My wife and I kissed, but didn't kiss. Some of my students texted me, be careful, wear a mask, get sleep. I read their words and I think I may cry. It is difficult to use Chinese. I only have a few words. I have many feelings. This morning, I will bike to school. I'll talk to students. We'll speak English. Then I'll talk to other students. We'll speak Chinese. Will I be happy? I don't know, but I can learn and think. I will ride home to the sun this afternoon. You don't know many words, you tend to repeat them. So, March 29th. Rain likes me. It likes the sun. You don't think rain likes the sun, but it uses the sun for painting. Together, the rain and sun make all colors. They paint together. The sun says, not bad. The rain says, I like. What are you doing? What are you giving? Who is your friend? Can rain have friends? It can. Can rain be your friend? If you listen, if you paint, if every day you say, not bad, I like. April 2nd. When we got married, we were very new. Our eyes were new. Our faces were new. We felt the world is very old, but we will always be new. We didn't know. We felt the world loved us because we loved the world. But the world didn't know us. We asked, why did the world carry so much sorrow? Now we ask, why do we? So I'm going to move backwards, and I'll read from the chapbook that Richard mentioned. If you're curious about learning about the poets in my life, particularly the ones I've gotten to know on the North Shore, this is a fun book. And thanks to Clay Ventre and Incessant Pipe Press, Clay's here for publishing it. The poems are titled with people's initials, and that's not necessarily to keep them secret, but I just wanted people who didn't necessarily know the poets to just treat this almost as if walking through a portrait gallery and seeing these quick little sketches. They're all 8 lines, couplets, so they're very brief. I like that they're short because that way the people I'm writing about know that there's no way that it could capture them, right? So this one's KC, Kevin, who's in the audience. There's no poet quite like you, Kevin. Sometimes I think you're Revere's imagination. Or I'm sorry, sometimes I think you're Revere's imagination. Talking like you're from around the block, but perfectly too. You know when to shut up. After this long evening of your students' films, you'll fly to New York to meet your son. Tell me, will we really never play one-on-one? We should have met before our knees were tired. MP, is it okay? MPC, MP Carver, also in the audience. It's been forever since you came to the library and listened to me on Langston Hughes. Since then, how many poems have you spelunked, turning lines into Yaris and Keshas? Now, Ms. Fearless, you flit from job to job, avoid the traps of adulthood, skipping, cherub-faced, into the cauldron of language. Oh, Richard, I'll do the one about you too. RH. When the music takes him, he hollers approval. He liked my poems enough, so I keep writing them. And we mustn't forget his reminder about our place. Professors bitch about their workload while they're killing poets in Iran. So continuing to go a little more backwards, I thought I should say that all those poems actually were inspired by my reading of Chinese poets too, and in particular poets like Du Fu and Li Bai, who and others who wrote poems kind of to each other. And so that was, and even the structure is kind of similar. And keeping with the Chinese theme, I'm going to read just two short parts of a sequence of poems called After Tu Fu, which are kinds of imitations, really. Summer night. The hostas have been cut, stems in a bag on our porch, like people standing in a crowded room. I turned the pile of dead leaves today, and beetles danced in the wet loam. What is this myth called freedom? In the backyard's evening sky, trees play catch with the swallow. Now, this is the last poem in the sequence. Thoughts of Tu Fu. When I feel lonely, I should think of Tu Fu, exiled, family and friends, hundreds of miles downriver. His wine, a thin blanket, his eyes too dull to read, talking to the moon. And my last poem, which is longer than all the others, those of you who know my poems actually know I usually write these long, boring poems, but I shared short, boring poems. So, all right. This one is a newer one, and it's longer. It's called Guano. And oh, I should say the voice in this, the speaker is technically a Chinese laborer in the 19th century, but I am certainly not trying to, well, you'll see, I'm not trying to channel his voice by any means. So, Guano. I wasn't planning to spend my 20s inhaling guano dust while mining guano mountains on a tiny island off the coast of what will someday become Peru. When an uncle promised me work in Ningbo, I hurried from my village where the long hairs, led by Jesus Christ's brother, had ordered us not to have sex. But in Xiamen, I was put in a pen full of shit and other young men, all talking in unknown dialects. Then they marched us onto the clipper ship. I saw masts clapping the air, chests of opium balls carried down gangplanks, and the market's fish flashing their recently living eyes. And I realized what the ancients meant by beauty. But then we went into the hold where the fuckers, barbarians, white men, peed on us through the hatches because some of us bitched about the state of things. And when we didn't stop, poured boiling water on us. We lit fires, why not? And well, that didn't help things. I was lying, diseased, surrounded by dead men. footsteps. Different barbarians came and put those still alive on another white man's boat and brought us here. Have I mentioned they had guns? And now they have these Africans driving us with whips, making sure we cart our quota of birdshit. Occasionally, in those moments when I'm pushing the unloaded cart back to the mountain, and the lesser weight gives me a chance to reflect, I imagine someone a few centuries from now telling my story at a bookstore in Cambridge to 24 people. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Well, our final reader of the evening is Lynne Viti. Lynne is the inaugural Poet Laureate of Westwood, Massachusetts. And her books include 2 volumes of poems, Dancing at Lake Montebello and The Walk to Cefalù, as well as the chapbooks Baltimore Girls, the Glasmorganshire Bible, and the story collection Going Too Fast. She is a traveler, a sojourner, pilgrim, and we learn things from her poems, as in the 3rd stanza of the title poem of her new collection, Walking to Cefalù. We walked around sharp bends, through overgrown brush, past asphodel. We saw the acanthus, the blueprint for Corinthian columns. The fact of it a revelation, the noting of it a reminder that art takes its cue from nature. And in the artful poems of this poet, nature includes the adventure of personhood. Walking to Cefalù follows a loosely chronological order so that by the final title poem, we've traced the development of a single and singular poetic consciousness from childhood to adulthood to maturity. The poem Reflections at Dusk, one of my favorites, begins. In the middle-aged heart, joy can bounce around and flow as blood moves through the arteries, but despair can get stuck. In Lynne Viti's work, despair does not get stuck, and neither does she. Spoiler alert, she makes it to Cefalù. And she's brought back some poems for us this evening. Please welcome Lynne Viti.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, James. Thank you, Carol Mankitti, for keeping this magical place alive. I'm going to do the opposite of what JD did and kind of go in chronological order. And I'm not going to give a lot of notes about these. I'm just going to proclaim them, declaim them. Judgment. 2 nights after the president was shot, my mother went out. She put on her silver blue eyeshadow. She wore her Persian lamb jacket with a mink collar. It was the year she was having the kitchen redone. The house was in disarray. I sat on our brocade sofa. I watched the small black and white TV. It sat in a temporary place atop an end table. I watched the news replay Jack Ruby shooting Oswald. A boy I thought I liked came by. I didn't like the way he chugged from the green Coke bottle, swished it around like mouthwash before he swallowed. I never forgave my mother. I wanted her to sit on the sofa with me and cry. I'm from Baltimore. This is one of my Baltimore poems, and it's for Sam Cornish, who was Poet Laureate of Boston for a couple bunches of years. And I actually heard Sam read when I was in 11th grade, so that's what this poem is about. For Sam Cornish at the Foghorn. Tall, awkward boy, a transplant from Oregon, always carried a beat-up paperback copy of On the Road, strap hanging on the number 3 bus, asks, "You like poetry?" He tells me, "Go hear this cat read his stuff. Black dude, he's real. Man, get there before the show. He goes on before the folk singers, down on 22nd Street, you dig?" I roll my eyes at this farm kid from out west who thinks he's cool, but I take note. The Foghorn. I check the listings in the evening sun, below the flicks, above the Gaiety burlesque ads. I tell my mother I'm going to a poetry reading, as if in a college lecture hall on a school night. I'm the youngest there. People sit around drinking beer. A young man, bespectacled, dressed in brown corduroys, crewneck sweater, steps onto the stage. Cheers and foot stomping greet him. He's here to be heard by the faithful. He recites his poems, declaims them. I've never heard a poet, not in real life. The nuns have played records of Dylan Thomas, of Eliot in English class, but nothing like this, a real poet, not a dead white one, standing so near I could shake his hand. He is mesmerizing. He looks at us through thick eyeglasses. He speaks in the vernacular. I came for the poetry, and when he was done, I went home to make curfew. I didn't come for the guitars and the banjos, the mandolins, and the Woody Guthrie tunes. I came for the poetry. I thought this system would work, but it's not so great. Okay, new system. This is about a bus trip, and it's called Greyhounds. Our Uber driver says we don't look like bus people. Here at the depot, in a tangle of shopping center roads, are families, a man in a wheelchair in a row along the wall. We get tags for the suitcases, hug our backpacks close. Ticket holders clutch their belongings, balancing them in their laps. Cell phones, Walmart bags stuffed with veggie chips, nacho chips. The station smells of something unidentifiable, maybe stale food, matted hair, layers of clothes that need laundering. Those with nothing but time and 27 bucks take the bus from Austin to Laredo, an all-day affair. We join the snaking line, inch our way to the man in a day-glow vest. Too old to be working, he stows our gear in the belly of the bus. Inside, it smells like the station, worn, sweat infused. We slide into 2 vacant seats, watch the parade of passengers. The driver paces the aisle, speaking English first, then Spanish. He shouts the rules. No alcohol, no smoking, no drugs. It's not Simon and Garfunkel. We've not gone to look for America. We only wanted to see the Alamo and the missions. We ride with the survivors whose teeth and skin show everything. They're bus people every day of their lives. They pay cash. We keep our well-worn credit cards and wallets hidden in the front pockets of our jeans. This is my COVID era book. I'm not going to inflict too many COVID poems on you. I've just chosen 2. 1, one. And I would love to read the Walk to Cefalo to you, but we'd be here till next week, so it is a interesting poem that takes forever to read. This poem is about my 36-year-old son. And it's a COVID poem, and you'll see why. When all the barbershops were closed. You hadn't let me touch your hair like that since you were in kindergarten. That first year of shutdown, you tired of buzzing your hair with the electric razor. We spread an old sheet on the floor. You held a towel around your shoulders. The afternoon light was perfect. I held the dark locks, snipped off the ends. I loved the feel of your hair, the sound of the scissors, the cuttings dropping onto the sheet. When you got home, you thanked me in a text, but I was the one who owed you thanks. You, who sometimes kept yourself so much apart, had let me get close again, if only for an hour. I have two new ones I'm going to lay on you. I don't think any explanation is needed for this one. It's called 13. In history, we were studying the Reconstruction. Something rushed out of me. I waited for the bell, ran to the girls' room. Blood pooled, then it dried. I wiped the blood away with brown paper towels. I didn't go to the nurse. Went right to Latin class. Gallia est omnis divisa in partes tres. At home, I found sanitary napkins in the chest of drawers, fastened napkin to belt, just like I'd practiced. My mother asked, when did it start? How did I last through school? How did I get home? Stop talking, I thought. Now I could say, I got my period. Some of the girls said, I'm on my monthlies. One said, I fell off the roof, or the flag's up. I didn't mind the cramps or the backache. Now I had my power. Didn't mind the dull pain or no swimming for 5 days at Girl Scout camp. Didn't mind the surprise of the blood accidents every 28 days, as far ahead as I could imagine. I had the dark red flow, smelling of iron and earth. Okay, this last one is self-explanatory. Elegy written in a soccer field. Canada geese, lawn soilers, suburbia disruptors squawk their way over the neighborhood under gray clouds. My heart is bruised, not literally, obviously a metaphor. In my email, a notice from my high school, another classmate has died. In her senior photo, every hair's in place, a bouffant helmet. The photographer must have instructed her to tilt her head to the left. Soon the number of us dead will be greater than the survivors of that post-war baby boom. A thought to mark this gray morning. As a child, I did the math. By 2000, I reckoned I'd be an old woman. But Y2K was my midlife point 20 years ago, with so much living yet to come. Now, the glass is looking emptier. The geese form a honking V in the sky, fly westward over the group home for the disabled adults, over Temple Beth David and the preschool toward the town pond. Rest well, Linda, of the teased, peroxided hair, the ready smile. Rest easy, Mary, of the sarcastic wit and the always lit cigarette. Rest in peace, Jean, with heart broken by faithless Cuban lover. Rest, Anna, of the sturdy check legs, the acne-pitted skin. If after death you've all been born again, as we were taught in religion class, why shouldn't it be as exuberant black-necked birds marking off the miles together, flying in formation on your way to that new life?
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Let's give the poets another round of applause. We have some books for sale. Poets will be signing books. Thank you all for coming tonight. If everyone could please move their chairs up against one of the walls. Thank you.
I just want to say hi, Julia.